Welcome to this deep dive, where we take a close look at the stories shaping our world.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're starting in the Netherlands. We're looking at the upcoming 4th of May commemoration, which, well, it's causing quite a bit of debate this year.
Yeah, definitely seeing that.
And from there, we'll sort of branch out, look at related things in Dutch politics, and even touch on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, all based on the material we've been digging into.
Right.
Our goal really is just to cut through some of the noise, understand the main arguments, the history people are bringing up, and, the tensions underneath it all.
It's really striking, isn't it, how a National Remembrance Day, something seemingly quite local, can suddenly become this flashpoint for much bigger anxieties and disagreements.
Absolutely. And those ripples then affect how we see international stuff, too.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. The Dutch National Remembrance Day, May 4th. What jumped out immediately from our sources was this real concern about disruptions.
Yeah, or just being overshadowed, right?
Exactly, that the main commemoration might get lost. It really makes you think about what such a day is actually for.
It does. Like, what's the main point? Is it laser focused on one specific historical event, or is there space for, other kinds of remembrance too? That seems to be the core argument.
The source material even sketched out this scenario, like a hypothetical strong leader really hammering home the point about remembering the Jewish victims of the Holocaust on May 4th. And it's a stark reminder, isn't it? Over 100,000 Jewish Dutch citizens deported, murdered, and the uncomfortable fact of collaboration by Dutch authorities, police, railways.
It's undeniable history. And while we've seen recent apologies, the sources also mention criticism, like maybe not enough concrete action at a key Holocaust monument event.
That involvement of Dutch institutions is, it's a tough part of the history. Apologies acknowledge it, but the discussion shows this ongoing struggle with how to properly remember, how to act on it.
Definitely still grappling with it.
And then, adding fuel to the fire, you've got this controversy around alternative events, organized for the exact same time.
Specifically focusing on victims in Gaza.
Right. Yeah. And the source material we looked at, strong disapproval of municipalities even allowing these events to clash with the national remembrance, feels like more than just bad timing.
Oh, for sure. It hits on fundamental questions, doesn't it? How do different groups express grief or solidarity? And does doing it simultaneously risk undermining the main focus?
Or is it expanding empathy?
Or is it diluting a specific memory? Clearly, people see it very differently.
The source material brought up this interesting concept, a Gezags vacuum, an authority vacuum.
Right, in the Netherlands.
Suggesting this might be part of why national events like May 4th are facing these challenges. It mentioned Ad Verbrugge's book, De Gezagscrisis, analyzing this.
That idea of an authority vacuum is pretty compelling here. If there's a feeling that things are fragmented, that there isn't, universally accepted leadership or values,
then it's harder to keep a unified story around something like May 4th.
They could certainly make it more difficult, yeah. Maybe makes it easier for alternative narratives or events to gain traction.
And we got a specific example. Farida Hussein, a government official reportedly involved in organizing one of these alternative Gaza commemorations.
At the exact same time?
Yes, and her New Surrey interview was mentioned. The source criticized her reasons for the timing as, vague.
Yeah, sort of unclear.
Leaves you wondering what the real motivation was.
Yeah, and an unclear reason definitely raises questions. Was it a deliberate clash? And why? Without a strong justification, it feeds that perception that maybe it is meant to draw attention away.
Now, here's a really interesting point from the source about the original intention of May 4th. The view presented was that it started out specifically for Dutch soldiers, Jewish people, and resistance fighters killed in WWII.
A very defined group.
Exactly. But the source argues it's become too broad over time. Now it kind of covers almost all Dutch casualties since WWII.
Right, the good.
That evolution, that broadening, seems to be right at the heart of some of the current arguments.
That's a crucial bit of history. I mean, commemorations often evolve, but the question becomes, does that evolution maintain the original core meaning, or does it water it down?
What's the anchor event?
Precisely. What historical event is May 4th fundamentally supposed to connect us to?
Building on that, the source talks about the Holocaust as a civilization spoof.
A rupture in Western civilization.
Yeah. It stresses that contrast, the West seeming to move towards being more humane, more civilized. And then this barbarity happens. In Germany, a place of high culture.
It's a jarring contrast.
And the source also highlights the huge contribution of Jewish people to that very civilization, Nobel Prizes, science, culture. It really drives home the scale of the loss.
Yes, framing it as a civilization's brick really underscores how unique and catastrophic it was. It makes us face how fragile civilization can be.
And how even advanced societies can fall into such cruelty.
Absolutely. And knowing the contributions just deepens the sense of loss and reinforces that specific context for May 4th.
And that understanding, according to the source, leads to some really sharp criticism of those organizing the alternative events.
Right. The argument being they just don't get this core meaning.
Essentially, yes. And that they're allegedly using it as a platform for anti-Israel sentiment. They even get labeled a vifte colonne, a fifth column.
Wow, that's incredibly strong language.
It is. It really shows how deep the divisions are, how intense the feelings become when Holocaust remembrance meets current politics, especially Israel-Palestine.
It suggests a belief that these alternative events aren't just about empathy, but something more adversarial.
And there's another layer of complexity around the official 45 May committee itself. The source pointed to past issues, like inviting the rap group Broderlieft as ambassadors of freedom.
Despite past anti-Semitic remarks.
Exactly. And concerns now about current ambassadors being critical of Israel, participating in that need my name, not in my name action. So the choices for who represents the day are causing friction, too.
Well, yeah, selecting people for those symbolic roles is always loaded. If they have controversial pasts or are involved in things seen as undermining the core message.
It's bound to spark criticism.
Understandably, it raises questions about the message the committee itself is sending.
This source even gave a specific example, Singer S10, reportedly using Sam Mokro as a main source.
And Mokro is described how?
As anti-Semitic, with manipulated reporting. That raises serious questions about the information some of these committees are working with.
Yeah, if people linked to national commemorations are relying on biased or unreliable sources, it really damages their credibility on these sensitive topics. Underscores the need for good sources. Fact-checking.
Then we hear from Holocaust survivor Deborah Marson. Her experiences in Ravensbrück, her whole life spent sharing her story.
A powerful voice.
And the source says she's deeply disappointed with the 45 May committee, even thinking about not participating in the official event this year.
That's significant. Her perspective carries enormous moral weight.
Her potential withdrawal really signals deep concern within the community about the direction things are taking.
And the source mentioned she advocates for Jewish people leaving the Netherlands and wants to spend more time in Israel herself.
Yes. It's a stark reflection of her feelings about safety in the future here, tied to the Holocaust's enduring impact and current anxieties.
A very sobering perspective.
This sort of leads into another concern raised in the source, a perceived shift in Dutch public opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
How so?
A noted drop in the belief that Hamas is solely to blame. And the source attributes this to what it calls biased media coverage.
Specifically public broadcasters and other outlets.
Yes. The term gaslighting was even used, suggesting a deliberate skewing of how things are presented.
Gaslighting implies a systematic distortion, making people doubt their own understanding.
How might that perceived bias connect back to May 4th?
Well, if the media narrative is seen as constantly downplaying one side's actions and emphasizing the other's suffering, it could definitely shift public opinion. And that might influence how people interpret May 4th and its relevance to today's conflicts.
Okay. On a slightly different track, still in the Netherlands, the source mentioned an initiative by the Telegraph.
Yes, with young people visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Right, and creating videos, articles to educate their peers about the Holocaust. Upcoming online content by Marussia was mentioned.
That sounds like a really positive approach.
It's valuable, yeah.
Absolutely. Getting younger generations to engage directly with the sites, giving them a platform that's vital for keeping these lessons alive and relevant. Yeah. Personal stories, young perspectives, they can be really powerful.
Okay, just briefly touching on something else, mentioned the comparison of politician Mona Kaiser to Hitler on that show, even to higher.
Right, the satire show.
It sparked a debate, didn't it, about double standards in satire, depending on the target religion, politics.
Yeah, the boundaries of humor, especially with historical comparisons. It highlights that tension between free speech and responsibility, doesn't it?
And perceptions of double standards can really erode trust, lead to accusations of bias.
Regardless of the satirist's intent, sometimes.
Okay, let's shift focus now to Rabin Baldusing. He's the national coordinator for racism and other forms of victimhood. And the source material. Very strong condemnation of statements he made to Al Jazeera, claiming there's a supposed war on Muslims in the Netherlands.
Wow. That's a very strong claim from someone in his position.
Yes, and the source mentioned calls for his dismissal over it.
Statements like that are deeply problematic, aren't they? Especially from someone whose job is supposed to be about reducing division. Saying war on Muslims risks polarizing things even more.
Undermines the whole point of the role, arguably.
It seems so.
Interestingly, the source did bring up a counter-argument, or at least context, pointing to the increasing visibility and demands of some Muslim groups, and also mentioned Baldusing's own controversial past as a politician in The Hague. So, maybe more complex picture.
Well, acknowledging group visibility is one thing, but it doesn't really excuse inflammatory language from a national official, does it? His past record might offer context, but the issue is the impact of his current words.
The source also added a bit of political context about his job itself. Apparently, the PVV party wanted to get rid of the position.
But it was extended.
Yes, by a minister from the NSC party, Judith Utermark.
Ah, okay. So that suggests maybe some disagreement within the government coalition about the role itself, adds another political layer to the whole thing.
Right. Okay, let's move across the continent now. Russia, Ukraine. And this quite intriguing reported raw materials deal between Zelensky and Trump.
Yeah, that caught my eye too. What are the reported details?
According to the source, Ukraine gives raw materials, gets weapons and investments in return. And American companies being involved is seen as some kind of security guarantee. Right.
Different, very transactional, a big shift from traditional aid.
Definitely. It's like a direct swap. Resources for security with corporate America involved sort of bypasses some of the usual political conditions, perhaps.
Potentially. More direct, less conditional, maybe.
And the source contrasted this possible deal with the EU's role, which was portrayed as, well, not very effective.
Sidelined, almost, despite giving a lot of financial aid.
That was the portrayal, yes.
Yes.
Raises questions about the EU's actual influence on how the war is going.
It's a critical take on the EU strategy. Suggests maybe the money and diplomacy aren't having the same impact as a direct resource-based deal like the one reported. Makes you think about the different ways international players exert influence.
The source then mentioned different views on what happens next. Like the view that Putin isn't actually ready for a real peace deal yet, even with this.
Right, and the risk of things escalating further remains.
Still so much uncertainty.
Absolutely. Even with new potential deals, the key unknown is always the willingness of everyone involved to de-escalate and negotiate seriously. The possibility of more conflict is always there.
There was also discussion of the view that Trump's approach is about putting maximum pressure on Putin, forcing a settlement.
Potentially involving Ukraine giving up territory. Crimea, Donbass.
That was mentioned, yes. And the source noted the symbolic importance of those eastern areas for Russia, which makes it incredibly difficult, ethically and politically.
Hugely sensitive. Territorial concessions raise fundamental issues about sovereignty and the principle of not rewarding an aggressor.
A pragmatic approach might explore it,
But the human cost, international law, you have to weigh that incredibly carefully. And Russia's view of those lands adds yet another layer of difficulty.
The source did clearly state the invasion was illegal, acknowledged the immense suffering in Ukraine, referenced Martin Schiepers arguing against rewarding aggression with land.
Good. It's vital to keep that injustice front and center in any talk about solutions. The human cost, the violation of law, can't ignore that.
The source also brought up Trump's past comments on Crimea, and his stance that this isn't his war. And interestingly, noted a perceived shift from people like Lindsey Graham, now seeming more supportive of Trump's approach.
Suggests political winds might be shifting again. Yeah, the stances of key figures change. It reflects how dynamic international relations are, how policy can shift based on leadership and priorities.
And the Ukraine segment ended on a pretty downbeat note, didn't it?
Quite pessimistic about leadership changes in Russia, yeah.
The expectation presented was basically more of the same. Aggressive behavior from the Kremlin towards neighbors.
But the big exception of NATO countries because of Article 5.
Right. Suggests a long-term security headache for the region.
That longer view really highlights the deep geopolitical tensions. The expectation that Russia's goals and its approach to neighbors might not fundamentally change anytime soon. A continuing worry for non-NATO countries.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really covered a lot of ground. Started with those intense debates around May 4th in the Netherlands.
Yeah, that clear tension between honoring Holocaust victims specifically and this push for broader inclusion or even alternative focuses.
It really highlights that ongoing challenge, doesn't it? How
Mhm.
societies balance specific historical memory with, evolving values and recognizing other suffering in national events.
It's a constant negotiation, it seems.
We also touched on that tricky area of free speech versus causing harm or spreading bad info. The even Tathiner example, Rabin Baldusing's statements.
Reminders of the need to navigate expression responsibly, right? Especially with sensitive history and social issues, thinking about the impact of words.
And finally, looking at Russia-Ukraine through that lens of a potential resource deal, it gave a glimpse of maybe shifting strategies in global affairs.
And raise questions about the EU's position in all of this.
Suggests the dynamics are always changing, new approaches might challenge the old ways, the established bodies.
Constantly evolving, yes.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Think about that incredibly delicate balance. Remembering specific historical tragedies versus fostering broader inclusivity in national commemorations.
How do societies navigate that? It's complex, often very emotional.
How do we make sure the vital lessons of the past aren't lost or twisted in today's world?
And also, reflect on the huge influence media and political leaders have in shaping how we all understand history and understand ongoing global conflicts.
A lot to mull over. We hope this deep dive offered some valuable insights for you.